one of the longest standing sporting trophies was finally taken off the US and brought home to Australia with the amazing person who designed it, Ben Lexon, and Alan Bond, who got the campaign all together. That was an amazing effort, and what an inspiration that was to go sailing, to keep the boat going.
Hi humans, and welcome along to Mind Detoxing, a channel that follows the life journey of John, an aircraft engineer in a past lifetime, and now a dedicated kinesiologist. Over the past 30 years, John has developed a truly unique, individualized mind-body healing technique that really forms the heart of the show. Throughout our time together here, we will explore the different modalities of healing. We dive deep with guest interviews, quick fine-tune episodes, and we even explore the world of sailing, if that floats your boat. From wherever in the world you have joined from today, welcome along.
Hi humans, welcome along. John of the Millennium. And we're going on another sailing adventure. This time it goes way back in the time machine, back early to my first particular boat, which was a boat called Cedar Party. And that boat took 5.5 years to build. And it was a very interesting boat, 45 foot long, Bruce Roberts design, and I sailed many offshore trips with that over a period of 3 years. But let's have a look at what it took to get that boat together in the first place. And many things happen along the way. First off, we need the dream to make it all happen. So the first thing for anybody, you need the dollars, the money to build this dream. This kicked off with I was helping a friend building a cement boat, and he invited me around one weekend to start plastering this 52-foot ferro cement boat. I knew nothing about boats, but in doing that layup, that plastering that weekend, I started to get the dream of sandy beaches, palm trees, hula girls, and a beautiful romantic sense of sailing. So I had to go off and start making a bit of money. Packed up my bags and everything, put all my tools on my motorbike. I had a Harley Davidson at the time. Went across to Western Australia to make my fortune, and there I got a job as a motor mechanic. And it was out on the edge of the desert, end of the wheat belt, beginning of the desert, at a place called Southern Cross in Western Australia. I worked there for a year, started off as a motor mechanic, and then I went full-time onto this man's racing car. And that was an amazing experience for a year. It's incredible what can happen on these adventures when you put your mind to making something happen. And must have been one of the best jobs I had in my life as a race car mechanic. We went around to many of the big circuits racing. It was at Wanneroo in Western Australia, Calder Raceway in Victoria, and then the big one to the Bathurst 1000. So what a time that was, working on race cars. Loved that job, many big long hours. I thought I'd made the fortune to build the boat, and started with the most difficult part of the whole project was finding out what type of boat to build. Now, I didn't know much about sailing, very little. Actually, I hadn't been sailing, but the desire was there, the thirst was there, the drive was there to make this happen. We've come back from Western Australia, and I hopped on the bike and went up to Brisbane, where they were building boats up there, and I had a talk to the designer, Bruce Roberts, and he suggested going a fibreglass boat. Although I was very proficient in metals and building a steel boat, but he said for resale value, fibreglass is much better. And I chose a design, bought the plans basically off the shelf. And went back, and then the next thing is deciding where to build it, because it's a big time-consuming project. And I was able to use a little bit of land on my sister's property. So building a shed was a big part of the whole lot. Getting all the materials together. Now, this is a shed to house a 45-foot yacht. So you think the yacht is a bit of a project. The shed is a big project as well. And cut the poles down from the property there, cut the wooden poles, dug the holes, put all these big poles in, and this shed had to stand over 20 foot tall. So that's a fair height and wide enough to fit the 45-foot boat. Getting the iron, I went to auctions, bought some second-hand iron to build the shed, finally got it all together. Interesting little thing at one auction, I was bidding on this iron, and this was the roofing material, and this guy just kept outbidding me all the time. And I decided to pull out of that bid and just watch the bid keep going. And this is just for second-hand iron on the roof. And he ended up paying new prices for it. And I went up to this fella and said, "You've just paid new prices for this second-hand material." And he said, "Yeah, but I only wanted second-hand stuff." Interesting. Finally got enough iron together and built the shed and then started lofting the plans. That's a huge job, lofting the plans to build a skeleton shell of this yacht. Now, the skeleton shell, from then on, you put a very high-density PVC foam over the whole shell structure of a yacht. So I built all that, did all that, built the structure, and you actually sew this foam and screw this foam onto this timber skeleton. And you finally have a shape of a boat that's a moulded shape. In other words, you got, 20 mil high-density foam over this timber strongback, this timber shell, which gets removed later. And then with this high-density foam, you got the outside shape of the boat, and then you start laying fiberglass. So this was a whole new project for me, doing something this size. Before I'd built a little bit of fiberglass furniture, but this was a huge new project, new skills needed, and new ideas how to make all this come together. So lots and lots of resin, about 10 200-litre drums of resin, maybe a bit more, to start building this boat. Each batch of resin, you're using 1 litre at a time, and you're pushing yourself because this resin hardens usually in about 20 minutes, 15 minutes sometimes, depending on the heat of the day. So you always had this tension to keep pushing yourself. You've got to get all this resin laid up before it goes off and starts going to a hardness. First off, it goes to jelly, then it goes to hardness. So you're mixing resin, laying out, wetting out the fiberglass, and this goes on for months and months building the boat. As I said, about 2,000 litres of resin went into the system. Lots of fiberglass material, many trips in the utility to go down to Sydney and get more fiberglass, more resin, come back with a couple of big drums of resin and keep building this boat. Finally, the outside shell was created. Then you had to pull the outside shell and everything. This had to be pulled out of the shed or skull dragged out of the shed. So you skidded out the shed on rollers, the best way you can do it. I towed it out with a tractor. Then 2 huge big cranes came in for the turning over of the boats. So you build the boat upside down, then you've got to turn it up the right way, and then tow it back into the shed again. So 2 huge big cranes to turn this big hull up to the right way and then tow it back in with the tractor. Before it went back into the shed, you've got to pull this skeleton frame, this timber frame, out from the inside of the boat. And then the boat's pretty floppy, and you have to reinforce it, pull the boat back into the shed, and then the big job of fibreglassing all the inside of the boat, and this makes it stiff and strong. So this is foam sandwich construction, composite construction using polyester resin. Big job, big time involved, and fibreglassing all the inside of the hull was another time-consuming job. Now, we're looking at a project here of 5.5 years, and you wonder, 5.5 years? That's a long time. After I built the hull and fiberglassed the inside of the hull, I realised I didn't have enough money to build the rest of the boat. I only had enough money to actually build the fiberglass hull. So it was back to work and building, building. I worked at many different places. One place was a tractor repair place, repairing tractors and four-wheel drives. Having mechanical skills, this came in very handy. And at the same time, I was building the boat. And I found an old worn-out motor, and they had it in this technical college. It was sort of like a demonstration motor. It wasn't working. It was all pulled to bits. And it was a Perkins four-cylinder diesel, around about 60 horsepower. So I had to rebuild that as well. Sent a lot of parts away for machining, and also got a lot of new parts like the bores, the pistons, the bearings. These were all new parts. Basically, when this motor was all put together, this second-hand motor, it was really a brand new motor by the time it was finished, the rebuild, with all these beautiful new parts in there. Then a gearbox needed, a marine gearbox to go on the back of this motor, and I found this ad in this paper, bought this marine gearbox, and I thought I'd better pull it down and have a look at it, and it had got salt water inside it, and a lot of the components were rusted. So I had to remachine so many parts inside this motor, and the availability of new parts weren't there because it was an older gearbox, a very good, strong marine gearbox, and it was a automatic gearbox. So it was a hydraulic gearbox. Lucky at the time I was working as a maintenance engineer in this factory and had lots of lathes, mills, a lot of machinery, welding equipment, so many bits, even a foundry. And I ended up working there off and on for 3 years. And what I was doing there is keeping the factory going, doing regular maintenance, repairing broken cranes and things that had been in disrepair for a while. And it was a good job that way, and it was also a good job because at the end of the day, the boss let me use the workshop there for rebuilding gearboxes, building the boat, and also another friend there, he was a welder. He welded a lot of parts for me, and the foundry was there for casting a lot of brass parts and making bearings, machining the prop shaft. Getting all that together took quite a bit of engineering. So this job came in very well, very handy at the time. So you've got to realise the thought that goes into this. In other words, you put a good vibration out and the universe reflects that back. So this job was just the ideal job at this particular time for building this boat. Bit by bit, it came together. The deck went on, had to make a mould for the deck, fiberglass mould, lots of fiberglassing again, and building the deck up. Then you've got the job of all the interior, all the cabinet making, a lot of woodworking, and I was a bit tight on money, and at one stage I did a lot of the cutting out and the machining of the timber with a chainsaw to rough it down to get it to the right size. Then a circular saw made up a bench and could cut up a lot of timber for the inside fit out. And a lot of that fit out was accomplished with a very old, beautiful, lightweight timber. It was Australian red cedar. And a lot of it came out of this department store. When this department store was demolished, I was lucky to get a lot of this very old, 100-year-old Australian red cedar with beautiful grain in it. It's a very rare timber, and it's worth quite a bit of money, especially the old timber. So this timber, being lightweight and easy to use, and managed to get all the interior together with a lot of that. Also, we cut out of the bush another timber called flooded gum, which was a light-coloured timber, while the Australian red cedar was a dark colour. This other timber was a very good contrast for the whole lot, and you could manage to put the whole lot together in a beautiful way, cut corners and curves. The big difference from a house to a boat is everything's curved. House, there's a lot of sharp corners and everything, while on a boat, most of the things have got curves in them, and that gives that beautiful nautical appearance of curves on the inside. So that was an interesting experience, that, because I hadn't done a lot of woodwork, so I had to teach myself new skills, and quite often on the yacht I'm working 12-hour days. At times I'd be exhausted because you're doing this 7 days a week, or you're at the job working and then you come home and you're building the boat more when you come home from work. So sometimes I would just be sitting down there, bit of brain fog, bit of tiredness, wondering, what's the next thing to do? How would this feel being out in the ocean? How would I build this? Bit by bit, the whole show came together. And the deck was all completed, all the interior was all completed, a motor installed, then all the electrical work. Miles of cabling has to go inside, navigation lights, interior lights, and then building the refrigeration system. That was another new experience, learning the skills how to build a eutectic refrigeration system. After a while you can understand why it took 5.5 years to build this project. The next major part was the mast and rigging. I think it was a total of 5 boats. We got together and ordered 5 masts all at once. And this was called the Canberra lamppost section, because in Canberra, Australia, they made these big light poles out of this very heavy aluminium section, which was just ideal as a mast for this boat. And this mast was 48 foot long. And the mast had to have spreaders on it, stainless steel wiring. This all had to be calculated, worked out, all the rigging there, then lots and lots of rope for the halyards had to go inside the mast. It took a lot of head scratching, calculations, getting the right angles right. So when the mast gets fitted to the boat, and that required a crane as well, you need to make sure you've got all the rigging at the right lengths. So mathematics came into a fair bit of that, getting the mast all right and everything. You can get mast manufacturers to calculate all that for you, and that's probably the better way to do it if you've got the money. If you haven't got the money, you do what I do. You make as many things as you can. Making lots of stainless steel, you'd be drilling, welding, putting all these stainless steel things together. Even the rudder, you've got a stainless steel shaft that goes into the rudder and a big quadrant, and all the steering, stainless steel cables, stainless steel chain to make all the wheel steering working. Finally came the big day for launching that, putting it into the water. And again, another big crane had to come in and load it on a low loader. These are the types of trucks that carry graders and earth moving equipment. This was called a low loader, and the big crane picked the boat up, put it on the low loader, and then it was the remarkable journey to go to Crowdy Head to launch this boat. This is back in 1983. This was the year the America's Cup was happening, and after I launched it, not long after that, the America's Cup was taking place over in New York, over in America, the USA. And Australia that year happened to win the America's Cup. One of the longest standing sporting trophies was finally taken off the US and brought home to Australia with the amazing person who designed it, Ben Lexon, and Alan Bond, who got the campaign all together. That was an amazing effort, and what an inspiration that was to go sailing, to keep the boat going. Back to the boat being on the trailer, going on that journey to Crowdy Harbour, and that's probably about a 50-kilometre journey to get to that harbour to launch the boat. And then again, a crane's got to lift the boat off the low loader and put it into a big trolley where the fishermen pull their boats out, clean them, paint them, and put them back in the water again. So this was a beautiful little coastal town, Crowdy Head, and it was an amazing sight. It was raining at that particular time, and I didn't know it then, but it's usually a good sign. If it's raining when you're launching a boat, it's a good omen. It's a good sign. The Maoris really understand this, the Maoris in New Zealand. When you're launching a boat, if it rains, that's a very good sign. And it was. Finally got the boat in the water, and wow, had to put a bit more ballast in there. I purposely didn't put the full amount of ballast into the keel, kept that a bit short. It's 4 tons of ballast, and these were big steel track pins that came out of the rollers on the tracks of these graders, these cranes. I saved them up over the years to put them in as ballast in the keel. 4 ton of them, mixed them in with a very heavy sand called almanite, and made up to a total of 4 tons in there. And the boat had a depth of 6 foot in the water, roughly just under 2 meters depth in the water. That was a beautiful day, the launching of the boat, the champagne breaking on the bow, and then going down the slipway into the water. My parents were there, and my father was very proud of me building this. And here I'm doing this at age 30, having a beautiful completed yacht, brand new, into the water. And I was a bit beside myself to actually achieve something like that. My father brought friends down to show him the boat that I built, and it was an amazing feeling having accomplished something like that. And still very little sailing under my belt, very little sailing. When I first started building, absolutely no sailing. The only time was on a little skiff under the harbour there, and I didn't know how to get back. Lucky my friend knew how to sail it back, and that was my only initial sailing experience before starting building the boat. So if you've got the dream, you can make it happen. But it's not just sitting there reading lots of magazines. You've got to get up the courage and the drive to take the first steps. And as I said earlier, my first step was going over to Western Australia, earning the money to start building this boat. And that inspiration, long, hard slog, 5.5 years, it kept me going to the end. And still I am enjoying boats And this is coming to you at present. I'm on the water, the beautiful waters of Thailand, enjoying the nice peace and serenity up here. Thank you all for coming along for this episode. This is John of the Millennium signing off until our next one on the sailing series, and that'll be a bit of a journey, the first trip of the boat. Bye for now.
Thank you, humans. You have been listening to Mind Detoxing, hosted by John of the Millennium, produced and co-hosted by Jessie Clayton, and special notes of love and gratitude to the beautiful talents of Jeffrey for the musical intro and outro of this podcast. Tune back in soon.